4:25 a.m., November 2nd, 2022. The Seattle Police Department received a disturbing report. 30-year-old architect Daniel Greene had been found dead, lying in a pool of his blood. What would be interesting about this case is that all the clues and investigations led back to one place. Jennifer Walker, his 27-year-old girlfriend of 2 years, and a batch of homemade chemical toxins and poisons that had somehow found themselves hidden rather carelessly in the Seattle apartment. The detectives involved knew they were about to stumble on a series of dark secrets fueled by jealousy, control, extreme psychosis, and an unnerving obsession turned deadly. But what they were not expecting to find was the why behind it all. This is the disturbing tale of what happens when love turns to obsession and turns sour. Born in 1995, Jennifer Walker never lacked financially. Her mother, Margaret Walker, would often describe her as a girl of many talents and big dreams. She excelled academically and had even won tons of science competitions in high school. In an interview, Lily Jenkins, Jennifer's college best friend, described her quite fondly as the nerdy girl who always had a solution to every problem. "She was so brilliant and sharp, it was fascinating," Lily would say later on. "Whenever you had a problem, Jenny would be the first person to call, and you better believe she had a solution for you." But no one could have imagined that the girl who brought such disastrous chaos was hiding behind the mask of a genius. You see, even with her impressive academic and professional achievements, Jennifer had a problem that was difficult to explain. To sum it up, she was a control freak, in a sense of the word. Everything had to always go her way, and as soon as she realized she was no longer in control, she would flip out. This need for control, coupled with an extreme inferiority complex, would stack up to have dire consequences that should have been the warning signs all along. Now, on the other hand, Daniel was a young and ambitious lad, born in the fall of '92, as the youngest in a family of 5 living in Chicago, Illinois. Being the youngest, Daniel received all the support he could get. By age 4, he had developed a strong passion for art and would grow up to pursue a degree in architecture. Young Daniel was as pleasant and gentle as any little boy could be. His older sister, Emily, described their relationship as inseparable, saying, "We'd been the closest in the family. He could and would tell me everything that was anything." And his uncle Mark described his demeanor, saying, "I'd never heard Daniel get into any form of trouble. Whenever I visited, I'd always find him working tirelessly on those little designs." When he was about 26, Daniel moved to Seattle after getting an offer at a prestigious architectural firm there. Leaving home was tough, but he knew it was worth it, hoping for a better future. Little did he know just how much this decision would change his life forever. He had met Jennifer at a summer tech conference he attended to network with designers. And Jennifer had been part of the engineering team for the conference. You could say it was love at first sight because it didn't take them long to hit things off. Being the sharp guy he was, Daniel quickly asked her out, and Jennifer was all too pleased to oblige. I mean, who would say no to such a funny and good-looking established architect? Their chemistry was undeniable. Conversation at dinner, simply splendid. And by the end of the night, both had fallen helplessly in love with each other. In the first months of their relationship, Daniel was enthralled with love for her. She was everything he wanted in a woman: smart, intelligent, beautiful, and driven. But little did he know what he was in for. Jennifer's family and friends had described their relationship as adorable and maybe a little enviable. "At the time, I was happy Daniel found someone he really liked," Felix, a good friend, would say. "He never shut up about her, and I thought she genuinely liked him too. I mean, with the way she looked at him as if he were the only thing in the world. Who wouldn't?" However, as the months passed, subtle changes began to surface. The same drive Daniel admired so much began to drive him crazy. Jennifer was too controlling, and she took pleasure in it. Everything had to be exactly as she wanted. She would invade his privacy and personal boundaries, constantly going through his phone and social media in his absence, always demanding to know his whereabouts. If she ever saw him so much as speaking to another girl, she would flip out. Even with his own sisters, she would always try to make sure they had as little access to him as possible. Jennifer would connect his smart devices to hers to constantly monitor him. She would get offended easily and never let go of grudges. She didn't want him hanging out with friends and didn't believe in alone time. The worst part is that she would constantly stalk him in public, always just being convenient around. It was suffocating. Whenever Daniel tried to bring it up, she would shut him down, saying it was only out of love. It got so bad that Emily, Daniel's sister, had to intervene, but he shrugged her off. But apparently, Daniel had confided in Felix, who was rightly shocked about the whole thing. Felix was a firm believer in boundaries, and he encouraged Daniel to set some and be strict with them. "I mean, I told him," Felix told an interviewer. "If she really loved him, she would respect his boundaries. I had just thought maybe he was a little too timid to speak up." Unfortunately, things weren't about to get better. At his workplace, Daniel's colleagues had noticed a shift in his demeanor. Sarah Jones, his 56-year-old welfare manager, even said that Daniel was usually carefree and easygoing, but after a while he became rather withdrawn from us, and in conversations he would be so weirdly anxious like there was something wrong, and the odd thing is that he was just always on his phone. By the spring of 2022, just before their one-year mark, Daniel finally opened up to his circle of friends, one of whom told a magazine that he told me he didn't feel comfortable with Jennifer, but he assured me that everything was under control anyway. Yet somehow, I didn't know if I could believe that. You see, no one knew just how bad Jennifer was. It seemed like no matter what Daniel said, or what others perceived, things simply weren't as simple as they seemed. But still, even with all that was going on, Daniel wouldn't let go. Why? One day he came to my house and he told me he didn't feel safe anymore, Emily said in an interview. He would say that nothing he did was ever good enough for her and that she was always accusing him of being a liar and keeping things from her. Personally, I thought that was so strange because this girl literally had access to his entire phone and social life. I just don't get why he would stay, you know. Daniel was smart. He was resourceful and intelligent. I just didn't get it. If I had known, maybe things would have been different. Despite everything, Daniel stayed loyal. He believed she was just going through a lot, and that this controlling and obsessive behavior was her way of coping. He thought that maybe if he planted more love in the relationship, she would heal from her past trauma and finally go back to how things were. But he just didn't understand that he couldn't help her. Soon enough, people stopped seeing him altogether. He missed his annual family Christmas dinner, which he'd always loved but had never missed before. And he even missed other important occasions, like the death and funeral of his brother. Just what was this girl doing to him? Well, what people didn't understand was that to Jennifer, this was all a game. She loved Daniel, and the more she loved him, the deeper her obsession got. She just loved to watch him, know what he was up to, and if she could be with him every waking minute, she would. But what she loved even more was the power and control she had over him. You see, from the very beginning, Jennifer had decided that this was going to be her husband. So she knew she had to get him attached to her quickly. She started by acting like the perfect girlfriend. She was everything he needed her to be. But in between the love and affection, she would subtly manipulate him in ways that got him unhealthily attached. One day she was sweet, and the next she was cold. One day she would go to the ends of the world for him, and the next she would do things that weakened his self-confidence. She would breadcrumb him and mix up love and detachment, all very subtly to get him sickly obsessed with pleasing her. He had to be hers forever. Soon this little adventure turned into an obsession, and before you knew it, she was bugging his clothes and car. Her paranoia grew to another level, and soon enough, she was convinced that Lily, her best friend from college, was sleeping with Daniel. Apparently, she had seen him drop Lily off at her apartment after giving her a hug, and she saw red. You see, Jennifer had introduced Lily to Daniel a few months into the relationship. She had been so excited to show off the man of her dreams to her best friend that she planned an elaborate brunch for just the three of them. Lily had been her closest and dearest friend in school. From the very first day they got assigned the same room, they clicked instantly. Jenny knew they would be friends for life. Jenny was the shy, nerdy type you would see cooked up in her room studying all night, while Lily was the fun, outgoing personality that always forced her out to parties. They couldn't be more different, but they had a bond so strong and unbreakable that they would even consider themselves sisters. You see, in college, Jennifer never had any luck with guys, maybe because she was always cooked up indoors, but the very few brush encounters she did have always left her so terribly scared. She found it difficult to read people, so she never really knew how to spot red flags easily. But Lily, for some reason, was a great judge of character. Well, for others anyway. So she would often advise Jennifer on who gave good vibes and who didn't. That's why Jennifer believed that, no matter what, whoever she dated had to get along with her bestie first, because that would be a good sign that he was a good guy worth giving a shot. In fact, this was a rule in their friendship: to analyze and approve the other partner and make sure they were good enough for them. But it seems like Lily had found Daniel pleasing. So pleasing even that she would betray her best friend for him. It had started subtly. Lily never had any interest in him initially. She had simply concluded that he was good enough for her friend, and that was that. But after fatefully running into him at a bar one evening while he was out with his guys, and she was brooding over yet another failed situation, they hit it off. You see, Lily always had problems. What you could call difficulties in relationships. She was just never lucky, and she never really kept a man for more than a few months. So that night, when she was drowning her sorrows in alcohol, she happened on Daniel, who comforted her in the most refreshing way she had ever experienced. He was such a good listener, so attentive, and was even gentlemanly enough to drop her home. But when he ever so delicately touched the small of her back to carefully navigate her into the car, she felt shivers down her spine. So this was why Jennifer was so obsessed. It made sense. Soon he was always in her thoughts, and she would use her most recent breakup as an excuse to seek comfort in him. And as you would expect, they grew close. But according to Lily later on, she wasn't exactly satisfied. The breakup made her vulnerable and crave intimacy, and the rampaging thoughts she had of Daniel weren't enough. So one day she called him over in hysteria, claiming to be having a panic attack. On arrival, Daniel saw her in pieces and made plans to comfort her. He held her in his arms as she broke down, and the soft embrace of his assurance made her break down even more. What was she doing? This was her best friend's man. Even though he was such a good guy, she couldn't have feelings for him. She couldn't do that to her best friend. No matter how lonely and depressed she felt, she just couldn't betray Jennifer like that. After collecting herself, she thanked Daniel, told him she would probably not be reaching out to him privately anymore, and walked him to his car, giving him a gratitude hug before he drove off. This was the exact moment Jennifer saw them together. All thought and reason left her. So, this was what Daniel was doing to her? After all the love and care she had shown him, this was how he repaid her? And with Lily? Oh, they would be sorry. They would both be very sorry. Instead of confronting Daniel or even Lily, she took matters into her own hands. She was going to make them pay. She synthesized some poison in her lab that would cause long-term health problems when ingested without leaving traces for discovery. Was she going to kill them? Daniel? No. But she would make him weak enough that he would be forced to depend on her and wouldn't have the strength to be unfaithful to her. As for Lily, well, time will tell. The plan was simple. Jennifer started sneaking these poisons into every meal she made for Daniel. She even went as far as taking them out to gatherings and slipping them in his drink, and Lily's too. Whenever she would visit Lily, she would sneak some into her salt and other spices to make sure she would consume them at least daily. And soon enough, Lily started struggling with her health. Frequent nausea, headaches, and fatigue. Her doctors were concerned because they couldn't identify the cause. Lily would open up to Jennifer about it, who would feign concern and care. But Jennifer wasn't satisfied. She wanted Lily to suffer for her betrayal, even though, up until now, she hadn't even confirmed whether or not they cheated. Lily's health continued to deteriorate, and Daniel was no better. He had become a shell of himself, frequently sickly with barely enough energy to go to work. And just like Lily, the medical reports were the same. No diagnosis. I had the spare keys to her house, Jennifer would confess years later. I would sneak in when I knew she was at work, and would pour the poison into her salt, spices, and sometimes even coffee. As for Daniel, well, that was easy. Since the doctors couldn't find what was wrong with him, Daniel chucked it up to stress from work. Jennifer, ever the attentive girlfriend, was also worried, using this opportunity to dote on him and make him more dependent on her. But why was she like this? Well, while Jennifer grew up in a financially stable home, it couldn't be considered emotionally stable. To be able to keep up with such an exorbitant lifestyle, her parents worked really hard, and they were hardly ever home. And being the only child who was spoilt and always had her way, she never really learned to be accommodating of others. If she liked something, she liked it exceedingly, and if she hated something, well, you can see for yourself. This explained her intense obsession with Daniel, her inability to communicate properly with either of them, and her over-the-board revenge on both. And Daniel? Well, on the other hand, he was rather grateful things were going back to how they were like he'd hoped. Oh, how wrong he was. I couldn't explain it. Sarah, his welfare manager, admitted this in an interview. Daniel was our star architect, but his work and performance had declined drastically. I even suggested he take some time off to get himself together, but he wouldn't. Well, it all came to an end one fateful night. 11:05 p.m., November 20th, 2022. Daniel slowly unlocks his apartment door and creeps in to avoid stirring up Jennifer, whom he thought was asleep. Upon entering the living room, he finds an angry, fuming Jennifer sitting on the edge of a sofa. "He told me he would be home by 9 p.m., Jennifer said in an interview. Well, he wasn't, so I got mad. You see, according to reports, Daniel had been working late that night, working on a new major project for a big-time client the firm had just required. Unfortunately, it had taken longer than expected, and he lost track of time. So, when he got home at 11:05, tired, stressed, and exhausted, he was surprised to see Jennifer still up. He made to kiss her and apologize. But before he knew it, she blew up at him, spewing profanities, and finally accusing him of being out late sleeping with Lily. He was shocked. Lily? What? How? He couldn't believe his ears. But more than that, he couldn't believe his eyes. Who was this woman standing before him? Jennifer had completely lost it. She was throwing things around and even hitting him. Her darker, controlling, and obsessive demons had finally reared its head, and for the first time, Daniel finally saw her for who she was. But it was too late. All I could remember was asking him how he could do this to me, Jennifer said later on. How could he cheat on me? Didn't he love me? I don't know what came over me when The argument was intense, the most they had ever had, and the neighbors had even reported that there had been a lot of screaming and crashing sounds coming from the apartment that day. The air in the room was hot with rage, and before Daniel knew it, Jennifer had picked up a knife to stab him. He tried to circumvent her, but unfortunately, because of the poison, he was too weak and couldn't stand properly. Suddenly, everything went blank. Daniel Greene had been stabbed to death 5 times by his 26-year-old girlfriend. The morning after, Jennifer tried to be smart and quickly called 911, creating a story that she came into the apartment that morning and found Daniel dead on the ground. She had told the cops she walked in on him like that. One of their neighbors, Mark, had said to a magazine, but I remember her yelling at him all through the night. I remember screaming. Then suddenly everything went quiet. Now, no one was buying her story. You see, aside from the eyewitness report from the neighbors, Jennifer had made a terrible mistake. After coming to her senses and calling the police, she was in such a frenzy that she forgot to clear up the evidence of chemicals she had used to poison him. On arrival at the crime scene, the police found Daniel's lifeless body and the batch of chemicals. A thorough forensic examination was performed, and they were able to find minute traces of the chemicals in Daniel's body, which was also later tied back to Lily, who at this point was hospitalized in a vegetative coma. When I got called that morning, a part of me died, Emily had said through tears in an interview. I just can't believe she could do such a thing. If I had known, I would have gone there and yanked him out myself. As the investigation deepened, the disturbing reality of what was really going on began to unfold. Jennifer's sick, manipulative thoughts had been found in a diary she was hiding under one of the wooden floorboards in their bedroom. Her paranoia and suspicion of Daniel and Lily's cheating, her detailed plan of getting Daniel obsessed and sickly attached to her, even the formula for the concoction she had been feeding them. The extent at which this mad genius would go was terrifying. On January 23, 2023, 27-year-old Jennifer Walker was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with a probability of parole after 15 years. Jennifer's mom, in an interview following the arrest, said that Jennifer had always been a bright girl, but she had always struggled to form lasting friendships. For a while, I couldn't understand who my daughter was, but as she got older, I noticed how possessive and controlling she could be. You see, this controlling pattern Jennifer had started a long time ago. Apparently, this wasn't the first time Jennifer's obsession broke a relationship. Her high school boyfriend, Mike, had testified against her in court. I'd always run into her when out and about, he had told the jury. At first, it was cute and quirky, but eventually it began to creep me out because I would literally see her everywhere. According to Mike, that was just the tip of the iceberg. She had this bad habit of starting fights out of nowhere and using that to question their relationship. I was always on edge around her. I didn't know when she would flip out, he had said. At this point, it all made sense. This was who she was, and unfortunately, poor Daniel Greene had to lose his life because of it. Emily had the biggest grief and regret. She wished she had done more for him, and so on March 3, 2024, she started a foundation solely dedicated to supporting domestic violence victims. Do you regret it? Samantha Hickens, the reporter documenting the case, asked from the other side of the jail gate. I think about it every day. I loved him, and if I could go back, maybe, Jennifer trailed off.